Tudo Edu Propeller. She will tell us a little bit about that shortly. And then she will be followed by Dr. Mamueletsi Musia, who is the Managing Director of the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement at the National Research Foundation. We also have Zakiti Mkhize, who's a scientist and a PhD candidate at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. We also have Inama Gula, who's an architectural engineer from the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. We also have Anne Chisa, who's also a PhD candidate in the crop science. She's also a founder and host of the Root of the Science podcast. As I've mentioned, their presentations will be followed by a brief question and answer session, as we usually do. Preferably pose your questions throughout the session in the chat box, and then we'll tackle the questions later on. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Thulile Kanyile to just address us with a brief overview. Thulile, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. On this very chilly, cold day in Johannesburg, I'm very excited to be engaging with all of you. And mine, really, I've been asked to look at what the importance of a full inclusion of women in STEM is. And I mean, in so doing, I'm going to also just try and touch on a little bit of what I do. But I wanted to make clear as a point of departure, because when we look at the statistics around the inclusion of women in STEM, it usually is around numbers. And so the interventions as well are usually about numbers, which almost makes us believe that the only reason why we should increase women in STEM is to equalize numbers. And I think there is a bigger agenda around, and there's a bigger need that we need to highlight when it comes to the full inclusion of women in STEM. And more than anything, it's embedded in the reason why we do STEM in the first place and the reason why STEM exists. And really, it is to ensure that we're able to understand things, and we're able to understand problems, and we're able to create solutions for those problems. And those solutions really are meant for the people and the citizens of the world holistically. And I think we know, where diversity is concerned, that the more diverse teams, I think research now, social scientists speak about how diverse teams, diverse leadership teams contribute and yield the best results, and in whatever space that you're in. And I think it's the same for STEM. I mean, technology is on the increase now. Technology advancement and innovation really is what is ruling economic development. And we know from a South African context how important it is for women to participate within the economy. And if we shut women out of STEM, which really is underpinning economic growth right now and determining the nations and how nations are growing from an economic standpoint, we're also limiting the citizenry and the growth of our citizenry. And I think that's very important to highlight. And it's important to highlight that STEM really is this collection of processes that enable us to come up with solutions that help society. And I think that is very important. Where there's a challenge is when we have solutions coming out into market that don't speak to the population of women or a particular population. As we know, technology is growing, and now we're seeing more and more biometrics, for example, and we're seeing how Black people are not being recognized by these algorithms. And it is because technology introduces a bias. And if we're not there as women participating in STEM to contribute to these solutions that are being created are not going to recognize us, and they're not going to be inclusive of us. So just beyond numbers on their own, we don't want to have a situation where you're at an airport in Asia somewhere, and this is a real case, and the biometric system is not allowing you to get in because it doesn't recognize your features. So if we are increasing women in STEM, the solutions and the innovations that we're developing within STEM are going to speak to the population of women. That's the first thing I wanted to highlight. The second thing I wanted to perhaps talk about is the assumption that STEM resides within formal settings only, or is limited to formal settings. So we find that STEM, when we think STEM, we think academics. and we think university, and we think increasing maths and science at school. And yes, that is true, but we use science, technology, engineering, and mathematical products on a daily basis. So we cannot exclude the general public from participating in STEM. And I believe that in the work that I do at Nkatsuto Edu Propeller with high school kids, where we teach them research and get them to come up with technology-based solutions, what we've noted is that the ability to come up with a solution does not rely on you having a degree or a matric or a doctoral degree or whatever that may be. The reality is that bringing it to life may require a person that has higher skills, but we need to open up innovation and STEM so that the basic, average, everyday person sees how important it is to participate in STEM. This is not something that should be rocket science, because we use technology on a daily basis. Every time someone is producing content, they're relying on an algorithm. And how are people on YouTube creating content if they don't understand how to manipulate the algorithms that show up and that show people that your content is basically what they should be looking at? So we should really be opening STEM up to more than just the people who are perceived as smart enough to participate. So women historically as well have always been coming up with solutions. We know with climate change in Africa, for example, in agriculture, in farming, that South Africans and Africans alike and women alike who particularly participate in that space have been coming up with technologies for years. The difference is in formalized STEM, we document and we publish and we communicate it, and everybody knows and can adopt and they can critique. But we really need to make people, the general woman, understand that on a daily basis, they actually are participating in STEM. It's just that it's not formalized. And I think as soon as we're able to, and this is my third and final point, and I'm glad because this is a part of communications. My final point is that we really need to do a better job if we are to increase the understanding of why women need to participate in STEM. And if we are to increase the numbers as well, what we need to do is communicate better. And by communicating better, we need to go beyond just women in STEM being profiled. We need to have women in STEM talking about the subject matters and the solutions that they are bringing to society as a result of being within STEM. And that is really important. And there are a couple of ways that are really low-hanging fruits in terms of how we can make this possible. If we think about Black Panther, the movie, for example, and we think about the young engineer who loves music, and that is the kind of thing we want to see now. We should be integrating STEM into everyday television, into everyday radio, everyday publication. If there's a person that is a forensic expert in a local drama, it should be a young, trendy person so that everybody that is out there can see that scientists are like us. They're relatable people. We're human beings, and we are actually contributing to solving everyday problems. And I think that is what we miss when we communicate these issues around the inclusion of women. It's just, we need to increase the participation of women to ensure that we have diverse teams so that these diverse teams can come up with more diverse and more inclusive solutions that we don't have to keep wasting money on and putting something into the markets, then it doesn't work, then you have to bring it back, so that from the beginning we have more inclusive teams and we open up STEM into the public, and we don't limit it to the corridors of universities and the corridors of schools. But thirdly, to make sure that we embed the culture of STEM within everyday communication and how people consume knowledge in radio, in TV, in dramas, if we have idols for music, we should have idols for solution creating, and we should make that something that is an everyday thing. And I think my points are going to end there, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the panelists and engaging with the audience further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thulile. One could pick up your passion as you were relating, your experience from a STEM point of view, being a scientist yourself. And I think one of the key takeouts for me is that it's not only limited to academics only, but I also just want to highlight for the benefits of members of the media who may have joined us, as well as some of our guests online, that Nkathuto Edu Propeller is a non-profit organization that Thulile runs and founded. And it has been it was founded in 2017, and currently it has employed 17 Black youth, and it has raised close to 30 million rands in funding and has impacted over 40,000 learners. We'll come back to Thulile later on to find out more about the great work that she's doing through the Nkathuto Edu Propeller. At this point, I'd like to bring in Dr. Mamoeletsi Musia. As I've mentioned, she's the Managing Director of the South African Agency for Science and Technology of Advancement at the National Research Foundation. She's going to shed more light on the programs that the National Research Foundation offers, or rather the support to students pursuing careers in STEM fields. Dr. Musia, over to you.
Thank you, Musidi. Sure, listening to Thulile, I'm like, I'm already out of a job because she can do my job a lot better. I've been asked to talk about what NRF is doing for students, but I just feel that we need to go a little bit behind. And I think Thulile spoke a lot more about what it is that we are doing before we even get to the student space. One of the things that my business unit does is, or we are tasked with communicating science, engineering, technology, and innovation to the broader society. So our major task is actually to engage with everybody who's here and have conversation about science. And the reason why we need to have conversations about science, technology, and innovation in general is for us to be able to demystify and to educate the society. I mean, COVID came and there was a lot of talks about working G5. It's the reason why there is COVID, et cetera, et cetera. We're having vaccine hesitance right now. There's education that is required in order for us to, understand the vaccine. So the first thing that we're doing as SASTA is to educate or to open up dialogues about STEMI in general. The next one is, so I said we need to go back a little bit. So the question is, what is NRF doing for students? I feel that if we start at the student level, we've already missed the boat. The boat actually starts at the parents. So the parents need to understand the values of STEMI, and they need to understand what it is that if a child says, I want to do a career in biochemistry, what is it that I will be doing? And so we need to take the parents along. We need to take society along. So that's where we start, educating society in general. But then the focus for the unit in particular is the learner. If we miss the learner, we will not have a student doing sciences. And if we miss the learner before grade 9, we are also late. So engaging learners by grade 9 in order for them to understand why they need to do pure mathematics, giving them the skills to actually pass pure mathematics, in particular, because that is the basics or the basic subject that they require for most of the STEMI subjects. So we are involved in that space at school level, engaging with the learners, assisting them in terms of getting it right in terms of mathematics and the sciences in general, assisting the educators to make sure that they impart the knowledge easier and in a way that the learners will actually understand it. We're making science interesting for the learners, and we're partnering with a lot of the NPOs like Thulile's Edu Propeller, for instance, would be one of the NGOs that we would partner with, because as SASTA will not be able to go everywhere. So we partner with those NGOs that are passionate about imparting or at least engaging with learners. And we go out there and we try and be out in the whole country. We have science clubs in schools, it is through doing the sciences that the learners are actually interested in the sciences. We have science camps, so it is at the high school level or at this learner level. And then thereafter we move into the universities. So there's a lot of funding for undergraduate studies. So we don't dabble there. We actually understand that in order for one to succeed as a researcher, in particular, you need postgraduate qualifications. So we actually start funding at honors masters. We start funding at honors level, and we fund honors masters, PhD, and we also support postdoctoral studies or postdoctoral experiences. So we provide funding. So we have two types of funding. We either give you full cost for your studies, and that one is dependent on the need. So a lot, and I think this one touches also to transformation, women, Blacks. So those are the ones who are marginalized, and oftentimes those are the ones who cannot necessarily afford to go all the way to masters and PhD. You find once you finish your basic education, the parents are saying, hey, we don't have money anymore, or NFSAS cannot support you anymore, and yet you want to continue with your studies. So that's where we come in. So depending on affordability, we either do partial funding or full cost funding. But then there's a need component to it, but there's excellence components to it. So we have the minimum requirements for our funding when we're taking minimum 65%, and we are supporting the STEM fields, the human sciences and the humanities, or social sciences and the humanities for honors, masters and PhD. Essentially, that's what we're doing. And then we also offer internship opportunities for graduates in the STEM fields. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musia, for that overview. I think there's always a need, especially for the young ones who are interested in pursuing careers in the STEM field, to find out where they can get support. We know that most people are unable to rather pay for especially postgrad studies from their pocket. And I must also mention that Dr. Musia has spent more than a decade at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, better known as the CSIR, in the various management and leadership roles, reinforcing her track record in providing strategic leadership to multidisciplinary teams. And then we're moving to an exciting part where our next three guests, or panelists rather, will share with us what it's like to be a young person within the STEM field. And I always say, if you want to know about something, better hear it from someone that has walked that journey. So I'm looking forward to this part. And first off, to tell us about her experience is Zakiti Mkhize. As I've mentioned, she's a scientist and a PhD candidate at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Zakiti, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Musiri. Yes, as you already mentioned, my name is Agiti. I'm currently pursuing my PhD in virology at the HIV pathogenesis program, which is at the Nelson R. Mandela School of Medicine at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So I am currently in my final year of my doctoral studies, and I must say, I think I've been fortunate enough to have a relatively smooth journey. I started my undergrad at the University of KwaZulu-Natal at Westville campus, where I did my BSc, and then I went to do my honors in microbiology. And then in my master's, I switched gears a bit to medical sciences, where I was accepted to enroll here where I am now at the HIV pathogenesis program to pursue medical sciences, where I did my master's and now my PhD. So my journey, as I've mentioned, has been pretty okay. I've been fortunate enough to, come from a background and family that was very encouraging of me pursuing a career in science as well as furthering my studies. I think Dr. Masia made a very important point about having the parents come along, because it's very difficult. And of course, historically, being Black people, if you do have a tertiary qualification after your first one, you are expected to go out and work, and really not a lot of people have the opportunity to study further. Again, as also Dr. Masia mentioned, NRF, I've been funded by NRF throughout my postgraduate studies, my master's and my PhD as well. I think as I mentioned, I've been in an organization that really is passionate about transformation as well, about having a young Black woman in the forefront. And I actually think that I just returned from a research visit in Europe, and I saw a man actually enrolled here, which was quite unusual, because we actually have a lot of females in this organization that are pursuing a career in STEM, you know, whether it's at the master's or the PhD level. But we don't see a lot of women, or a lot of us actually don't go on to, you know, hold higher positions, as in become faculty, become leaders, become head of departments, become deans, and all of that. And I think that's across the globe. I mean, as it was mentioned, that only 23% of people in STEM are women. And of that, even less than 20% hold you know, a high status kind of position, as in leadership and in decision making. So I think some of the barriers which prevent women from reaching that stage is they're multifaceted. I think they are multifaceted. There are many, I think, challenges which are just human and not woman related. And there are many which really do speak to you being a woman. The first most obvious one is the biology, of course. After a woman may, or during even pursuing a PhD, you know, a woman may fall pregnant, and there is no such thing as maternity leave when you're pursuing your PhD. In the contract that you sign, there's no such leave for that. So if that does occur, you end up falling behind. You fall behind your male counterparts, and there's really nothing that you can do about that as a woman. And there's also nothing that the organizations provide to make it easier for you to come back. So in the nature of the field that we're in, it's definitely you kind of have to work to really prove yourself. And if you're not publishing, and if you're not, you know, showing that what you're actually doing is being recognized, you really do fall behind. And I think a woman's biology is one of the major barriers to entry into those higher level positions and positions of leadership. I also think women ourselves, we also have our own intrinsic imposter syndrome. You know, we walk into a room full of men, and it's very difficult, especially being Black and a woman, being able to stand your ground there and to show that you belong there, and to create a seat there. And I mean, it's very much a boys' club if you're gonna walk into a room full of men as well. And even applying for jobs, for certain things, when you do get the interview, you are invited to an interview, you know, there's a panel just full of men. I mean, all of that is very, very difficult. As much as all these organizations say that they are for transformation and all of that, it's very, very difficult as a woman to overcome certain human aspects, such as imposter syndrome, etc. So I think those are some of the barriers which really limit us to reaching, you know, the levels of our male counterparts as well. And I really do think that it's still a boys' club, but we do have a lot of women on the ground, which is what I was mentioning before, is that a lot of women do enroll in their masters, in their PhDs, etc. But we don't really reach that level of higher management. And of course, being a young person, my favorite question is, what advice do you have for young people wanting to pursue a career in STEM? And I've always, definitely all the good things. You need to work hard, you need to be resilient, you need to actually have a good academic record as well. As Dr. Masia said, when you apply for funding, excellence also plays a role. So you really need to make sure that you are good and sound academically, and that your marks show that. Unfortunately, there's really no way around it. It's kind of a bottleneck in that state. But I think also I also regard myself as a youth STEM activist, and that's testament to my YouTube channel, which Tulile also mentioned, is also using platforms. I mean, the best person to ask directions from is someone that's walked the path. So I use that platform to motivate and inspire and encourage young people to pursue a career in STEM. I think YouTube is a great platform. It is accessible. It speaks to young people as well, not only to use YouTube for makeup tutorials and things like that, but to actually use it to educate themselves. I also share on topics such as funding your postgraduate studies, choosing your science majors, everything to really equip young people to have a smooth journey and to have a much better experience than we have. So that's really, really important. And I also think young people really need to believe in themselves and do what I call is shooting your shot. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You have nothing to lose with putting yourself out there and making yourself seen and known. And really, obviously, in the science field and in any STEM kind of field, your work really speaks for yourself. So you really, for itself. So you really have to be dedicated to your work, work hard, and the work will do the talking for you as well. And in closing, I also want to say that it's important to empower each other and, provide knowledge, of course, to our parents as well, as to why it is important to pursue a career in any STEM field. I think a lot of jobs in the future are going to require highly skilled people that are skilled within these STEM kind of discipline. So I think it's really, really important to bring people on board, share the knowledge, share with your parents why you want to study further, and show them that actually, if I actually do go and study after my BSc, I'm going to land up here. But if I'm able to study further, besides the money aspect, I may be setting myself up for a much greater career trajectory. So I think it's really important that we bring everybody on board as to why it's important, and then we'll be able to have the kind of support structure that will really, really be conducive for us to be able to reach those levels that women have historically not been able to reach. So that was my experience. Thank you.
Apologies for that. Thank you so much, Zakiti. I think you've really said a mouthful from the support that probably over time will keep improving, especially at a peer level, so that when you enter these workplaces, as you've mentioned, that are still boys' clubs, that there's sufficient support for young women, especially young Black women, to also be able to land safely in some of these organizations. And I must applaud you for your use of language, because I felt it really does resonate with young people, even touching on the various platforms that we know that's where we are likely to find most of young people. Your YouTube, I mean, the colleagues at GCIS know I always propose that let's go on to some of these platforms. I mean, I am a broadcaster, but I always say, let's also tap into some of these new platforms that are rising, because they are reaching quite a huge number of young people, and provides a good opportunity for engagement, especially on this kind of topics. I mean, I'm imagining that the field as well, in terms of remuneration, once you have completed your postgrad studies, that you can live the soft life that the young young people are after. We just need to find various platforms where we channel that message, that, if you persevere, if you keep on excelling in your studies, ultimately the soft life will find you, so thank you for that. And now that you've touched on these digital platforms that are available to us, I think what I also found interesting, but this is something that we'll touch on a bit later on, the fact that you completed a master's project entitled Impact of Human Immunodeficiency Virus Type 1 Subtype C. Because if you actually go onto Twitter, even yesterday, there was a topic trending within Black Twitter in particular, and there's still an opportunity to actually educate about STEM using topics that people are still unclear of, and HIV is still one of those, because I know people were accusing each other of having tested HIV positive and not being sure that what happens in terms of relationships, intimate relationships in particular. So I think we definitely do have an opportunity going forward to expand a bit more and simplify. I always say simplify science so that we make it appealing, as you've said, not only to prospective scientists, but also to their parents, so that, they also encourage their children to pursue careers in STEM fields. And then without any further ado, I know I've eaten up on your time, Inam Kula, but I'd like to bring you through as well. And as I've mentioned earlier, Inam is an architectural engineer at the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. Inam, what has been your experience as a young person within a STEM career field, and how would you then encourage others as well to look into opportunities that are available within the field?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I think time is morning here. I'm currently in Senegal. But yeah, my name is Inam Gula, as you've said. My architectural journey has really been a difficult one. It hasn't been easy. So most of my degrees, I studied them at UCT. So I had my bachelor's at UCT, my honors and my master's. And then I did a postgraduate diploma in planning at the University of Witwatersrand. So, I mean, the first time I applied to architecture school, I wasn't accepted. And I really was devastated. But I think it was only until I was in the course and in the system that I discovered that I was in a field that was set up to systemically exclude people like myself. So in my undergrad class, I think the demographic of Black women was around 5 to 10%. And by the time I got to master's, it was only me as a Black woman, so there were a lot of fallen soldiers along the way. So I think there are many hindrances that prevent people from becoming architects. And I think one of them is the portfolio. So to get into architecture school, you have to have a portfolio that you apply with. And this is quite a stringent portfolio, which has quite a bit of requirements. And I think that it's difficult for someone that comes from a township school or rural school to actually be able to compile these requirements. And then I think there's the issue of finances. So architecture is really an expensive course and it requires a lot of resources, So often we found ourselves, especially as students that didn't have as much resources, that it contributed to the lack of confidence in the work that we were producing. And also, lastly, I want to touch on the subject of institutional racism. It's not a secret that institutional racism does exist within institutions of higher learning, and I think this is also one of the hindrances in not just in architecture but in STEM fields that we don't have as much transformation as we'd like to see. So I guess all in all, there are many structural issues that prevent young women from participating in STEM career paths. And I think that universities, the government, and other institutions have a key role in to play in mitigating some of these systemic issues. And then I want to touch on something. So in 2018, there was a study that was conducted and found that there were only 68 registered Black female architects in the country, which is absolutely insane for a country where women or Black women constitute more than like half of the population of the country. So I guess when we say that like the world will be liberated by women, we're not just saying this for lip service. I think it's a testament to the fact that we are the only ones who will be able to imagine or create a society that's not characterized by patriarchy, racism, or just general oppression. So I guess if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, STEM careers are responsible for the implementation of most of them. So how will we reach these goals if women are not participating in these career paths? And also, if you look at the context of South Africa, I think that if we look at the difficult past that we had, it was made successful through the use of infrastructure. So without the construction of apartheid cities and apartheid spatial planning, I don't think that apartheid would have actually been successful. So I think that we as a society and we as a country need to take the same amount of intentionality and effort into creating a reality that's better for all. So and then I just want to touch on like my personal journey in terms of funding. So I was lucky enough to be funded by the National Department of Public Works through their Human Capital Investment Department. And this was not just financial support, but they still support me today because I'm part of a young professionals program where I'm part of a candidacy program. And here it's really about, just advancing careers and making sure that young Black women or people of color in the built environment get their professional accreditation, and which will really help transform the built environment in South Africa. And then I think lastly, I want to just like also put a testimony to say that Dr. Musiwa, we really appreciate the work that NRF is doing. I was also a partial recipient of partially funded by the NRF. And I think that this is really important. And the second component, which is the needs component, is really important because often I think that we look at the merit-based, but also the needs component was very helpful towards many students like myself. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ina, for that. It's also interesting to note that departments like Public Works actually do have opportunities for students who would like to pursue careers in STEM. And then you've mentioned something that was that obviously is still a bit of a shock. The number of registered architectures, within your field in particular. And one hopes that through sessions like the one that we are having, it will really encourage a lot of people and draw them into pursuing studies towards this kind of fields. And then last but not least, to share her own experience, her own journey of embarking on a career within the STEM field. We have Anne Chisa, who's also a PhD candidate in crop science. And Anne, I would just like you to educate us a little bit about crop science, because I think I have an idea, but I just want to be sure. And she's also the founder and host of the Root of Science podcast. And, I feel guilty because not so long ago, where I work, we're looking for podcasters, and I wasn't aware that there's actually podcasters who are podcasting with a focus on science in particular. So this is quite interesting, but let me hand over to you, Anne, and then you can share with us what your experience has been like.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Musidi. In terms of my journey, it's quite interesting that you brought up that you'd like to know more about crop science, and because it falls under the banner of agriculture. And whenever I speak about that I'm an agriculture student, everybody's like, oh, so you want to be a farmer, So there's more to that than what meets the eye. So in terms of my profession, being a crop scientist, we deal more on the research side. So for example, we work with various different crops. We test them how they perform in different locations. And then we are able to consult with farmers, be it smallholder farmers or small scale farmers, and commercial farmers on the best methods and the best practice of it. Within my journey of being in STEM and being in agriculture, I would like to say that for me, seeing a Black female scientist, I only saw one in my fourth year. In my fourth year of my studies, I'm at UKZN, or University of KwaZulu-Natal, and the first time that I had a Black female teacher teach me was in fourth year. So I didn't necessarily see people who were already ahead of me, like visibly in front of me, who were doing science, to kind of have that visible role models. And you'll hear as I speak today, that's like my passion, and that's something that I really am passionate about. But I was fortunate enough to be part of organizations such as the Black Women in Science. There's also an organization called Visibility STEM Africa, which I was also part of, which helped me sort of see people who look like me, most importantly, Black females, because I think most of us growing up, we didn't have role models of people who looked like us, who sounded like us. So being part of these organizations, it made me think a little bit deeper, to be like, what can I do in terms of creating a platform to kind of change the stereotype of what a scientist looks like. So that's when I started my podcast, the Root of the Science podcast, to amplify Africans all over the world in terms of them doing science, to first educate people that there's more than just being a doctor. Not saying that these are not good occupations, but like science is so diverse. There's so many things that a scientist is. And also at the same time is to educate people about what the scientists are actually doing. We saw during the pandemic the importance of having science to be communicated by scientists. So with the work that I've been doing, it also came from when I was in my master's. When I did my master's, I was working with small scale farmers. And during my master's, after I finished my research, the talk was that I need to publish papers, because that's what you have to do for your scientific contribution. But on my part, I was like, okay, I've done this work and I've worked with these farmers closely for such a long time, but this work and this research would not really go back to them. I want to be, how do we connect with the people? Because, as scientists, we're always trying to solve a societal issue. But the way that we scientists communicate our science is usually very complicated. So again, it was also another reason for me to create this platform to showcase science being done by scientists in a manner that can be consumed by everybody, not only the scientists themselves. In doing this, currently I'm doing my PhD, I'm in my second year. It's also allowed me to challenge the narrative of what a scientist is. Tulile in the beginning spoke about how when we think of science, we only think about it in the academic space. But speaking to the different scientists who I've spoken to, I've seen how science is applied in everyday life. Like we said earlier, that even what we're doing right now, it's science. It's something to do with data science, I'm assuming, or computer sciences. Even the movies that we watch, it's all got to do with sciences. The self-driving cars that are now of the future, it's got to do with scientists. And it's quite also beautiful for me to see women who are doing this amazing stuff. I've spoken to women who are astronauts, who are working with really amazing research, trying to find cures for pancreatic cancer or methods to really improve that. So in the work that I've done, it's kind of also opened up my thinking, and it's broadened my horizon. And I think it's so important, especially for young people, to see women doing all of these amazing things. And I think that kind of inspires them to get into science. More so, it's very hard to aspire to be something that you've never known actually exists. So in the work that I do, that's also something that I showcase, that these are the things that people are doing. So in this umbrella, it's called science communication, which I'm really, really passionate about. And more so this year, I've tried to take it a little bit closer to home by doing more science engagement. I think Dr. I don't know who said it, but they said that it's very important to teach young people, especially at a very young age, to get into science, where if it's being in high school, it's a bit too late. So currently what I've been also doing is going into primary schools and speaking to young people about science, showing them what amazing scientists are what amazing things scientists are doing. And I think it's even more special for me when I speak to young girls, because I wish I had a me, or I wish I had a Zakitu, I wish I had an Inam who I could look up to be like, oh my goodness, this person is doing architecture. I thought that's only a boys thing. But now bringing it to young girls at such an early age, it's really, really, really important. And I think my goal is to do that. And when I think about my PhD and why I do my PhD, I had a moment in it where I was like, why am I doing this? Where do I want to go with this? What do I want to do? It's also kind of made me think out of the box of what I can be as a scientist. I've been speaking to other people, and there was this term about being a new age scientist, that you're not limited to just go through this linear path of being an academic, but you can be an academic and also, for example, have a YouTube channel where you engage with young people. And I think that kind of creates it destroys these boundaries that scientists are these people who are not human, they are robotic, and I think when we do that, it can bring more people into STEM, because STEM is such a wonderful field. But I think sometimes there's this ivory tower that you have to be the super intelligent person. Not saying that you shouldn't, but there's this ivory tower which kind of makes it a little bit exclusive, but it's not. And that's something that I do and that I'm passionate about. And it's really beautiful hearing all the other women on this panel who also do this type of work, because it's super, super important. And I think I'm going to end it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm loving the passion within which each one of you has been sharing your journey. One can feel the excitement, the passion, but also even as you're relating the challenges, it gives one confidence that, it's just a matter of time. Some of these challenges will be overcome, and hopefully we can see more young, especially Black women, taking up their space within the STEM fields. I have questions now, so we are moving into our questions and answers session. Dr. Msia, I'm going to pose a question directed to you from our chat box, and then while I'm giving you the opportunity probably to just check quickly through your stats, I will bring in Thulile as well. But let me first start with a question, and then Thulile can respond first with the question that I have for her. Dr. Msia, a question directed to you. It's actually two. Do you perhaps have figures of how many Black female postgraduate bursary beneficiaries you have on your roll for this academic year? And how does that compare with the previous years? And then follow-on question is is there a specific quota that you have to fulfill to fund Black female postgraduate scholars? This question was posed by Kgaugelo, but I want to bring in Thulile first, and then Dr. Musia can respond afterwards. So Thulile, please tell us a little bit more about your nonprofit organization, Ngatudo, Propeller. I mean, you're employing so many young people already, and you've impacted 40,000, which is quite a huge number. But also I want to find out, are you getting support from organizations that have financial muscle to help you so that your work can spread beyond where you've been able to cover so far?
Yeah, so the essence of Ngatudo Edu Propeller really is, if you have scientists like myself, for example, and my partner, Uthandeka Mhlanga, where we met during our master's degrees at the CSIR. And I think one of the biggest frustrations we had was, how do we translate research, and how do we participate in research that goes into community and impacts society? And we felt that the academic environment was so focused on outputs like publications and going to conferences and, so things like that. And for us, we felt like there was a particular mindset that you require to be able to move from being able to identify an idea, understand it, try to solve it, and then get it convert it into a business case, and then convert it into society. So in essence, what we do is exactly that: teach high schools or high school kids technology and innovation, but more specifically from a research perspective. So to say to them, if you have a research methodology as a skill set or as a process, how do you then go into your community and understand problems, understand the user that has that problem to a point where you can develop a solution for it? And then we don't end there, and we take it further into enabling them to develop business cases. And now we've also got a Ngatudo Techno Propeller, which is a for-profit entity that really seeks to commercialize and distribute the technology-based ideas or the conceptualized ideas that our young people come up with. And we've got a hydroponic prototype that we're trying to get funding for now. We've got very exciting products that we've got that have come up, or at least ideas that have come, that our young people have come up with. We work, and I'm going into answering your question about the funding. So we work in exclusively township and rural communities. This means that these are young kids that don't have computers, that don't have access to internet, that don't have access to devices to conduct research, which means we actually have to input that. So everything that we do with our kids, we have to pay for. And we can't bring our kids out on a Saturday if there's no food, for example. So our program is reasonably expensive because we have a library, or rather a mobile research facility. We have to bring out young scientists so that they can mentor and facilitate these workshops, so that our kids can interact with people who sound, look, dress, walk, come from where they come from. And that for us is very important. But also to not shortchange our kids. If a child that goes to St. Stedians is getting a workbook that is beautifully colored, our children as well from township schools need to get the same. If we're saying that our children need to learn computer skills and coding, it's not enough for us to go in on a Saturday and just expose them, because that's a little bit unfair. So we have to go in continuously. So our program is continuous. If you're in our program, we're there with you and we grow with you over time, which is why we now are able to monitor some of our grade 8s who are now first years, and some of our grade 11s when we started with them, who are now final year university students. And now we're able to really monitor the real impact of the work that we're doing. And now really getting into how many of our learners, or how many of these young adults now, because a lot of them are now young adults, how many of them have an entrepreneurial mindset? Because if we're going to start to introduce entrepreneurship and the mindset and tenacity and agility and character that is required for entrepreneurs to thrive. If we're starting post-matric, we're late. We need to go in a little bit earlier. And in so doing, we have seen that the kids that participate in our program, even though we don't teach science and we don't teach maths, they marks increase. And we think it's because of the indirect approach that we use to teaching them about the relevance of STEM. So it's not necessarily about being able to find X, but it really is about understanding why you need to find X and what you can do when you can find X. Because when you can find X, then you can create an algorithm, then you can create an app, then you can offer multiple services within coding spaces, because you understand more than just why the diagram of a leaf is important. You understand how you can use that at home to manufacture and make your own and increase the yield of whatever you're planting at home, because then it's relevant. So really, that's what we do at Ngatudo. We take technology and innovation directly into school playgrounds in townships and rural communities. We've been very fortunate where funding is concerned. We've got a super funder called Nozala Trust that's been funding us over the years. Took a dip a bit because of COVID. They suffered as well, so we had to suffer as well. So then we hibernated a bit, but we're back up and running now. So Nozala Trust funds quite a lot of our operations and quite a lot of our activities. We have funding from Bonahalo De Beers Trust. They are specifically looking at, also what we do with them is the specific area, just 2 hours out of Polokwane in Bochum. So we work, their funds are specifically for the 4 schools we have there. The Department of Science and Innovation actually saved us from the pit we found ourselves in as a business last year as a result of COVID, and we appreciate them greatly for that. They assisted us with a little bit of business rescue, and we're able to recover again this year. So they also assist us quite a lot. And of course, partnerships for us are very important. We've partnered now with DUT specifically because we need to prototype and we need to get these technologies that our learners develop into market. So we need more partnerships. The demand is really high. The need is, the kids are screaming for us, and we don't have enough capacity to cater for all of them. But ours is really a fairly disruptive approach to the curriculum and the education system. And over the past 5 years, we can see that the model we're using to support the curriculum with research and with entrepreneurial principles actually works. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was very insightful. I always say within each one of us, there's that small voice, no matter how small it is, crying out that for each one of us to lift as we also rise. And I'm glad that we heeded the call. And it's even more appeasing to hear that even other ladies here, young as most of you are, you are already doing your bit to ensure that you make it easier for those who are coming after you. Dr. Msia, I'm not sure if you perhaps have had a look at your stats and you can respond to the question that has been posed to you through the chat box.
Thank you. Before I answer the question, and no, I don't have the exact numbers, but I've gone to our annual reports and I'll just give the numbers that are there because they are audited. Before I go there, I must say that my heart jumps every time I see Thulile and I listen to her. I think it was last week when I sent her a message and I was like, you know, I still remember the very first day I saw you at CSIR as an intern, and I saw the very first day I saw her make a presentation and I was blown away. So I just want to mention that it's always nice to see her shine like this, and my heart always smiles. I'm just going to give you the numbers as we have it in our annual report. We're growing the number of Black students that we're funding. Over the past 5 years, it has grown from about 69%, which was close to 9,000, to about 83%, close to 10,000. And the number of women in general, or not necessarily Black women, has also grown from about 54% to close to 60%. In total, last year we gave about 11,000 bursaries across honors, masters, and PhD, and then the percentages that I spoke to, they talk to that number in general. I don't know if that answers the question, but basically those are the numbers that I could just get quickly.
Okay, no, I'm sure it does help a great deal. And I would encourage Gaugelo, who posed the question, if they would like to find out more, I'm sure they can engage with you directly through the GCIS colleagues if they would like more clarity on the numbers you've just shared now. Thank you so much, Dr. Musia. And then I'd like to move to Inam, Zakiti, and Anne. You know, and what I'm going to pose is probably an Oprah question, or yes, probably an Oprah question that says, in as far as the young you was concerned when you first decided that this is now the field I would like to study for and probably work in my later years. There were a lot of challenges which you have shared quite extensively in your earlier remarks. What advice would you give to the young you in terms of the kind of support you would have liked to see available to help you ease much more easier into the STEM field? And looking back now, still tapping onto the support, what do you think needs to happen more so that we break this glass ceiling and make it much more accessible for young Black women to venture into STEM fields? Could we perhaps start with Inam and then Anne and Zakiti?
So, I mean, I think that, as I said before, I was very fortunate enough to be part of a program that offers a lot of support to me. So the program that the Department of Public Works has is, it doesn't actually start in university. It also starts with grade 10 learners. So they, recruit grade 10 learners who are majoring in science and maths. And then, they give them the support, and they have these holiday camps where, they look into the academics deeper. And then obviously assisting them also with like applications into universities and the choice of a career field. And then from university onwards, like preparing them into, the jump of going from township schools or rural schools and then into university, because that's also like a difficult complex that some people aren't able to handle. So I think that the department assists them in terms of the readiness and into getting into the university spaces. And then even within the university space, I think that there's pairing, obviously, with some of the older students in the program with the younger students, where we as the older students also get to mentor some of the younger students and just, assist them with like day-to-day topics that we find in the university. And then I think that also general support from the department, having, quarterly sessions with the department, and also having some sessions with the minister, and telling the minister some of the challenges that we actually face in our education journeys. So I think that, having that type of support for me was very important. And I think that there should be more institutions or organizations that set up those type of support structures for students in STEM fields. But I think that more than anything, I think, we have a responsibility to society to not use our education as commodities, but to rather use our skill sets as, a contributor to making better environments. So I think that that's also really important, in the types of support groups that we have. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Could I then give the opportunity to Anne and Zakiti to also just weigh in?
Yeah, in terms of what Inam said about support, I think that's the most important thing that I also want to touch on. If I had to speak to young Anne, I think it would be on that you will be supported, that, you know, the challenges will come, and it's okay to sort of face these challenges and to fail, but there's going to be some sort of safe space. And I've been privileged to have that type of support from my parents as well, who have supported my journey in pursuing my postgraduate degree. Even though sometimes the challenges of, you know, funding, I'm sure we all know that, where sometimes it's delayed, it's a bit complicated, or you might not get it, but I have the privilege where my parents came in. Also, most importantly, just in terms of the support, in terms of my academic space, I also have a really great supervisor who is a male, but he is really about the support aspect, allowing me to shine and to flourish and to push me and to motivate me. And even though sometimes it feels like I can't do it, like the world is against me, the system is against me, he motivates me in that sense. Now, I know some people do not have that. They have very maybe difficult relationships with their supervisor, but I hope they can find that support from their other colleagues in where they are at. And also, I think it's to not suffer in silence. We haven't really spoken about the mental toll that pursuing STEM actually takes on us. We put ourselves at a really high standard, and sometimes our experiments or our work do not go according to plan. COVID also really took an emotional toll on all of us. We had deadlines and we had trajectories of where we're meant to be at this particular time and space, but that couldn't happen. And many of us sometimes suffer in silence because sometimes pursuing a postgraduate degree can be very isolating. So I think it's also reaching out and telling people that, you know, you are struggling, it's okay. And if your institution allows for the psychological aspect, do that, attend therapy. And also, I think in terms of what more could be done, I think it's just on that mental health aspect of it, where we have, I don't know, sessions or groups where people can talk about how they're struggling and we can motivate each other some more. Of course, the funding aspect, a lot of people want to do postgraduate degrees, but it's very difficult because they don't know the channels of how they can get the support, because pursuing a postgraduate degree requires a lot of, not only for you to live, but also just for your actual research. It's very, very expensive. So in terms of that, that's what I think needs to be more done on terms of the financial side, and just as a holistic side, as a person, as a woman in STEM as well, is very, very important.
Thank you so much, Zakiti. Over to you, Zakiti.
Thank you. I think what Tulile mentioned about why it is important to teach young people, you know, why they need to find X is that's such a golden nugget, because I remember when I was in grade 10, and that's when we choose our subjects, and I chose maths and science, of course, and life science and all of that. And I remember coming home one day and saying to my dad, oh, you know, this maths and science is so difficult. Like, you know, I'm struggling here. And he said to me, and my dad has always been supporting me through this. And he said to me, well, are other kids doing it? And I said, yeah, they are. And he said, well, then why can't you do it? So I think at that time, when I was just so disgruntled and just so like, oh, this is so difficult, you know, why can't I just having lunch at break and chilling in the quad with the other kids instead of, you know, being in the library reading or doing homework. And I didn't get it then why it was important for me to find X. I just thought it was just difficult to find X. So I think, you know, it's so important to understand. And I think that's where the love comes from as well. And it's very intrinsic. No one can teach children to love science or to love maths. It really has to come from within, you know, and when you understand why it is difficult or challenging rather than difficult to find X, and but you understand the importance, then it gives you more encouragement and motivation to actually find X. So I think, you know, what Tulile said, like I said, is really a golden nugget. What I would say to my younger self back then, which I didn't really have an opportunity, or anyone who told me that, is that why am I doing what I'm doing, and why is it important that I actually do these subjects and do well in them so that I'm able to become a scientist like I am today. And when I was young, I didn't even know that they were scientists or what a scientist was. You know, when I was younger, it was you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, things like that. It was never you want to grow up and be a scientist. So I think it's really important to understand the why. And I think what can be done better, which I've also touched on before when I spoke earlier, is empowering yourself as someone, of course, that's in the field, and also providing knowledge to the people around you. So providing knowledge to your parents, also telling them the why it's important, you know, and in that sense, you can have a better support structure, and then I think you'll really be able to excel better in the field of STEM.
Thank you so much for that. We have come to the end of our very insightful, very interesting, I might add, webinar of our young women, young Black women in particular, who are breaking barriers within the STEM fields. Thank you to each and every one of you, our panelists, for your contribution. You have really, I can tell you that you have certainly positively influenced me on a career in the STEM fields. I might not be so young to start, but I certainly, as a parent, I'm here thinking, you know what, if I probably had, this is a proper socialization that anyone could ever have as a parent in encouraging our kids on some of the available career fields that they would not easily have known about. So kudos to each one of you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your contribution. And I'm glad that some of you have been engaging some of the questions we've been receiving on the chat box. Dr. Musia, I see you there in your engagement with Gaugelo. And to every one of you, thank you so much. And I really hope that we can have a follow through of a session like this, you know, just to track what has changed, what has moved since we've had this conversation. And on behalf of the colleagues at GCIS who keep on coming up with these gems of discussions, we thank everyone who has been participating in this conversation, whether by listening or posing questions or making comments. So with those few words, I thank you all, and I wish you a warm Wednesday, depending on where you are in the country. But from Johannesburg, the temperatures have been dropping, and I hope you keep warm. And until we meet again, keep well. Thank you.